Hello and welcome to another edition of Perseverance Records Interviews. I'm Rob Esterhammer, here with Charles Bernstein and Wes Craven, respectively the composer and the writer and director of A Nightmare on Elm Street and Deadly Friend, although Wes did not write Deadly Friend. That was scripted by Bruce Joel Rubin, who also scripted Ghost. Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen.
My pleasure.
Same here.
Excellent. Let's get right into it. Thinking back to the early 1980s, how did your paths first cross? How did you meet? Wes?
Well, obviously we had done the picture, and we were looking for somebody to, to bring a score to it that would give it a distinctive flavor. And, I think among just kind of fishing out there and putting out the word and talking to people, we heard about Charles, and I had an interview with him, and was impressed, very much impressed by him, and it just felt like we could work together. We were kind of fellow spirits. I don't know, speaking for myself, Charles, but that's how it felt.
Yeah, that's my recollection too. I remember being in Santa Barbara and getting a call from Charlie Ryan, who was my agent at that time, and he said, there's this guy Wes Craven. I think you guys would really hit it off. He's an intellectual. And I said, that sounds great. We're speaking about our first meeting, which was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street, correct,
yeah. And that's pretty much my recollection. I went down there, really liked the guy, and he spoke really cogently and intelligently about the film. He was talking about the script and what they were looking for and how he liked to work. And I felt real comfortable at that point, and things went forward.
Excellent. Now, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, the film and the score, were among the first and probably the best that firmly established the creepy association of the nursery lullaby and horror. What sort of discussions did you have over using that idea, and whose idea was that? I'd like to get both of your opinion on that.
I remember Wes and I got started on the picture, and it was about a third of the way through. I was sort of sketching ideas and doing things, and I had the feeling that it would be nice to have a theme, an actual melody, because so many quote-unquote horror movies, they had scary music and menacing music and hectic music and whatnot, but not many of them had like an overarching set of themes. And I came to Wes, and I played him the da-da-dee-da-da-da-da-da-da, that theme. And then there was a little accompaniment thing, dee-da-dee-da, which was based on the jump rope.
Yes.
At the beginning, kind of a nursery rhyme, 1, 2, buckle your shoe. And I didn't think Wes was going to go for the melody idea for some reason, and he just jumped at it. He said, "Yeah, that's really cool. That's going to, really contribute to the film," and it kind of gave me a green light to just move forward on that.
Fabulous.
It was rather funny because the little ditty, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, I wrote in the script almost as a joke. I didn't know whether anything would ever become of that, and I think there were many people that read it and said, "Well, you'll take that out eventually." But the tune that Charles came up with was so perfect for that it became actually a big moment. And if I'm not mistaken, we shot that little jump rope scene at the very, very end of shooting. I think the last day when we shot kind of the ending that Bob Shea wanted, as far as the kids going off in the car, and we shot the little girl's jump rope and put it in there, and it worked incredibly well.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the alternate ending, the new ending. Can you tell us what ending you had planned for the movie originally?
Well, it wasn't hugely different. The original was that she just came back. The mother was obviously alive, and Nancy kind of went down the walk and went off to school in this very dense fog. And that was just kind of you were left with not knowing if it was a dream or what exactly it was. And there were two things that happened. One, Bob Shea very early on saw the possibilities of a sequel which I did not, frankly. And so he wanted to have some kind of a hook for a sequel. And so I came up with this idea of the kids driving off in the car. And Bob wanted Freddie to be driving the car, and I refused. But I said, I'll put a roof on the car that, has Freddie's colors. But the other funny thing was that when we went off to shoot my version of it, because he said you can shoot both versions, with our limited budget, we found it absolutely impossible to fog up the entire street. In fact, the few times we tried, the wind would come up and quickly blow the smoke away.
Oh, no.
Being the practical person that any director is, you say, well, you know what, it probably will work the way with a combination of the two things. So that's what we ended up with.
Excellent. Great. It was about 2 years till Deadly Friend came along. Was there a shorthand in communication that you could capitalize on, such as in spotting the picture?
I recall, Wes had some really practical and, for me, unprecedented shorthand ways of communicating, which actually no one I had subsequently worked with had come up with. We had kind of divided the score into what you might call exclamations and sentences, although I don't think those were the words we used at the time. That's the way I thought of them. They were things that punctuated and things that sort of carpeted. And we actually came to the dubbing stage with those elements separated. So Wes could punctuate with musical elements at a different, in other words, come in at a shocking level that would be different from the level the other music was playing at. So if Freddie, for instance, were to pop out, from some place, or if in Deadly Friend there was something that happened that Wes wanted to jar the audience, he would be able to manipulate that separate sound, in a different way from the others. So I think we called them stingers for the separate sounds, even though they weren't stingers, but they were all kinds of different things. And then the basic scoring elements.
Was there a difference in scoring electronically and scoring with a full orchestra in regards to those stingers? Well,
it's interesting. You have to put your mind back to first the year 1983 and then the year 1986, I think, is when we started on the other. The world then was very different for a composer. Now it's sort of assumed that everybody has a private studio and a public studio where we work in our private realm and then we go into an orchestra studio. In addition, in those days, especially in Nightmare on Elm Street, it was pretty unprecedented that composers had private studios, and that one was done exclusively in a private, in a home studio. Deadly Friend was divided pretty much equally between recording, I believe it was at Warner Brothers with a decent-sized orchestra, and elements from the home studio and elements of the two combined. It was the first time for me that I used the home studio elements in combination in any degree with an orchestra.
There was sort of a whole synthetic world that had been created by various musicians, including some classical musicians, of the Moog and computer synthetic music and everything else. But there was also a tendency of some composers to try to use electronic versions of acoustic instruments, for instance, fake violins and so forth. And I felt those really sounded terrible. So whenever we would use synthetic music, it was always used in a way that you could clearly tell it was synthetic, but there is in some ways something kind of a little alien and soulless and scary about synthetic music, so that when we were able to actually have enough budget to bring in some acoustic instruments and record it in a normal studio, it made for an interesting combination. You could kind of use those two different textures to go from something that's perhaps a little bit more reassuring and normal feeling to something that was quite alien and bizarre by using something that you could actually afford more, which was electronic music.
Yeah, as Wes says that, I'm starting to recall now some of our conversations about that. I remember, Wes, you very much liked the idea There were a few cues, one of which I think was the Thanksgiving dinner, and there were some others earlier in the